As car enthusiasts, many of the vehicles that made us fall in love with cars are no longer being produced. That, or the modern versions of them, are not the cars that we fell in love with. And while there are loads of new and modern cars to get excited about, they are now more than ever expensive, which means that for a lot of enthusiasts, myself included, used cars are really the only ones we're considering. Which means that the car that you're going to be looking at isn't going to be coming from the loving hands of Ford, Honda, or BMW directly into yours. There's going to be a middleman, the previous owner. So there's a lot more to consider. It's not like going to a dealer lot and picking out a brand new 0-mile car. There's a lot of stuff to look at. This is a video all about how to buy a used car, so I'm going to assume that you already know what car it is that you want to buy. And for the sake of the video, let's just say I'm trying to buy a Toyota MR2 Spyder. I'm not actually. Nobody likes those cars, but let's pretend. Okay, great. But there's more to it than just knowing what make and model you want. That's where research comes in. Many cars have a multitude of engine options, trim levels, mechanical variations, and special editions, which makes it a lot more difficult than just saying I want that one. The Toyota MR2 Spyder was made here in the US from model years 2000 to 2005, and for the first 2 model years, it was only available with an H-pattern 5-speed manual. Then later on, it was available with an electro-hydraulically automated manual transmission, but that was much more complicated, and I like stick shifts, so definitely gonna go with that. I'm getting all of this information, by the way, from the Wikipedia page, so that's a great place to start, and you're gonna wanna cross-reference that with forum posts, enthusiast groups, Facebook pages, anywhere where you can get information on the model, so you know exactly what kind of model, year, trim, etc. that you want. Now the trick is where to find it. If you saw the little tag at the beginning of the video, then you know this is sponsored, and if you saw the title of the video, then you probably know by who. AutoTempest.com is essentially a search engine built from the ground up with this exact kind of car buying process in mind. I used to use Search Tempest years ago to help expand my Craigslist search radius when I was looking for used sports cars, and now AutoTempest.com is all of that and more. It pulls together all the results from sites like Cars.com, TrueCar, eBay Motors, and all the other places you'd otherwise be looking. Plus, you can still use it to help expand your search range on Craigslist and soon on Facebook Marketplace too. Particularly when you're looking for a very specific model, trim, and powertrain package in a sea of cars that you probably don't want, like the MRS, the customizability AutoTempest gives your searches is an absolute godsend. And now when you're looking at the market of your chosen car, it's a great time to figure out exactly what kind of price points these cars are being listed at and how much you're likely going to have to spend in order to get what you want. You also need to set a ceiling now for how much you're willing to spend before you find an example that you absolutely have to have and spend too much money. Knowing your budget can also help you when it comes to haggling. And you'll want to spend a good amount of time searching for the right example to buy, because if you think it's exhausting searching through these lists of potential candidates, absolutely nothing is as exhausting as the next step in the car buying process. The unpleasant process of buying a used car has spawned limitless internet memes because it is universal. If you're in the process of buying a used car, sometimes from a dealer, but especially from a private seller, you are almost guaranteed to encounter some absolute grade A morons. Post descriptions that provide insufficient information, for sale pictures taken during an earthquake, unclear prices, unclear mileage, unclear powertrain, people saying I know what I have, people blatantly lying, people asking $14,000 for their 90,000 mile automatic MR2. I don't care how pretty the paint is, and that's all before you've even messaged anyone. Lazy, unmotivated sellers, unresponsive or unclear sellers, sellers who have a lien on their car and uncertain title status on the vehicle, owners who sell their cars and leave them listed for sale, people who sell their cars out from under you as you're driving 3 hours to check them out, and people who are blatantly lying. At this point in the car buying process, you have very little invested, so even if the car seems like a great deal, if the seller is unresponsive, won't send pictures, can't answer basic questions about the car, or won't set up a time for you to check the car out in person, you're probably better off passing on it. Otherwise, you risk wasting more of your time, or worse, buying a lemon. So it better be a heck of a deal. Most people don't want to haggle with salesmen, let alone random people you're meeting in a Kmart parking lot, but you have some advantages on your side. In the case of the MR2 Spyder, these are cars that are in good supply and relatively low demand. They're generally considered to be pretty ugly and very slow. And even when they're in pristine condition, they're still not as head-turning as something like an RX-7 or as classically appealing as something like a second-gen MR2 or a 240SX. So that's good leveraging power right there. No one is beating down your door to try and buy your MR2 Spyder. So now we just need to figure out if the seller is negotiable. There's a right and a wrong way to figure out if someone is negotiable. If someone has posted firm on their for sale ad, odds are they're either posting some really personal information or they're not negotiable on price. Lowballing someone is a great way to be a bad buyer. If you've ever listed a car for sale, then you know how annoying it is to get people offering you half your asking price and trying to devalue your car. And that's not to say that lowballing doesn't work. Sometimes it can be a good way to get a really great deal. You just have to determine how aggressively you want to pursue that deal. Just try and be a good person. If the seller lists their vehicle as OBO or best offer, or just lists an asking price, there's probably wiggle room on the costs, and it can often work in your favor to work the price down a bit up front over text or phone, and then maybe more later once you've gone to see the car if there's anything unexpected. The vast majority of sellers are willing to negotiate. It's expected. This is another reason why it's great to know the market for your car. So when you're gonna go look at a car, make sure that your mentality is just that. You're going to look at the car. You're not gonna buy it any more than I'm actually gonna buy this Toyota. You're gonna look at it, and if it all checks out and it is what you expected and the seller is willing to come down to the price that you determined you're willing to pay, then you can buy it. But you should never be afraid to walk away empty-handed. At the very least, you got some valuable car buying experience. Finally, you have the car and the seller directly in front of you, and at this point, a lot of prospective buyers can feel hamstrung by social convention. You don't want to feel like you're asking a ton of questions or pestering the seller because you don't want to be rude. That's just polite. But in this particular circumstance, you need to look out for yourself a bit. Ask about the maintenance history if you haven't already. If something seems out of place, press for more information. If none is available, that's a problem. Point that out. Paint fading or chipped? Point that out. Low tread on tires? If it wasn't mentioned, point it out. You'll have to replace those. Inspect the undercarriage, especially if you're in a northern area prone to rust. Look in fender wells, under the hood, and around pinch welds. Before you even drive the car, it's great if you can hear it being started up cold. Keep an eye on the ground for oil drips to make sure that nothing is leaking. And then when you actually do drive the car, keep an eye on oil pressure, coolant temp, and air-fuel ratio if you can. Row through all the gears to make sure that none of them grind or pop out of gear. This gearbox is nice and tight. Be respectful, but ask the owner if you can get on power to make sure that the car performs properly when it's under load. Test the HVAC, cruise control, stereo, and soft top when applicable. When you finish your test drive, let the car run and again, check for oil leaks. It's always recommended that if you can, you get the engine compression tested before you buy something, especially on vehicles with more expensive or finicky power plants. It can tell you so much about the health of the engine. If there are any red flags, don't be afraid to walk away. Odds are you're going to spend more money fixing whatever problems the car had than you saved on the deal that the seller gave you. Now at this point, if the car checks out and you still want it, some additional haggling can take place. Let's say that there's some scuffs on here that the seller didn't tell me about. I say, hey, why don't we meet at $8,000? He counter offers $8,100. I give him the cash. He gives me the title, the keys, and off he goes. Now, as the seller is finding out, I'm not actually buying the car and I just gave him $8. Don't do this exactly, but if you look at a car and you don't want it, don't be afraid to walk away. It's not a complete loss. Special thanks again to AutoTempest.com for deciding to sponsor this video. Be sure to follow them on Instagram to keep up with any of their cool video collaborations they're doing with YouTubers like us. And we've put a link to their website and some potential MR2 searches down below so that you can get started on your own. Eventually, with enough persistence and perusing of AutoTempest.com, you probably will find the car that you're looking for. Just make sure you don't buy something that's been abused, neglected, or poorly modded. Oh. I actually bought this car. I actually bought this car! I bought this. I actually bought this.